You want to know how a family reunion falls apart before a single dish hits the table? I was standing in my kitchen at 6 in the morning, testing the glaze on a spiral ham, when I realized I hadn't heard back from my son about the head count. That was the first sign. I just didn't know it yet. My name is not important. What's important is what I did for 31 years. I raised my son alone after his father walked out when the boy was 4. I worked double shifts at a hospital laundry for the first 8 years, then put myself through community college at night, then got my certification and spent the last 2 decades as a licensed practical nurse at a long-term care facility 20 minutes from the house I bought by myself in 1997. That house has 3 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for a proper gathering, and a kitchen I've cooked 10,000 meals in. My son. I will call him by what he always called me, which was Mama's boy until he was about 15 and decided that embarrassed him. Grew up in that house. He knows the smell of it. He knows which step on the staircase creaks. He knows I kept a drawer in the kitchen full of his drawings until they yellowed at the edges. He also knows, or should know, that I have been planning this reunion for 8 months. My mother's side of the family hasn't gathered in one place since 2019. There are cousins spread from Atlanta to Detroit to Phoenix. There are aunts in their 80s who don't travel easily. There are great nieces and nephews who have never met each other in person. I am the one who makes things happen in this family. I am the one who sends the group texts, books the venue, keeps the spreadsheet, and makes sure there's food enough for everyone, plus whoever shows up unexpected. Because someone always does. This year, I decided to do it at my house. 43 people confirmed. I rented folding tables and chairs from a place on Route 9. I ordered a tent for the backyard in case of rain. I hired a woman from my church to help me cook for 2 days straight. I bought a spiral ham, 2 briskets, 4 pans of mac and cheese, collard greens, potato salad, 7-layer cake, sweet potato pie, and enough sweet tea to fill a bathtub. Total spent just under $4,000 out of my own retirement savings, because this is what I do. This is what I have always done. My son's wife. I will call her what she is, which is my daughter-in-law, though that word has never sat right in my mouth since the way she looked at my living room the first time she walked into it. Like she was calculating what it would cost to redecorate, had been part of this family for 6 years. 6 years of Christmases, 6 years of birthday dinners I cooked from scratch, 6 years of me sitting on that couch when she had her first miscarriage and holding her hand while she cried. I don't say that to collect on it. I say it so you understand what I thought we had. The morning of the reunion, I was standing at the stove at 6 a.m. testing the ham glaze when my phone buzzed on the counter. I thought it was my cousin calling about directions. I picked it up without looking at the screen. It was the text notification from the family group chat. I had added my daughter-in-law to that chat 3 years ago so she would feel included. She had forgotten that. Or maybe she had never checked who was in it. The message was from her to my son. She had meant to send it to him privately. Instead, it went to 41 people at 6:14 in the morning. Tell me again why we have to spend our whole Saturday at your mother's thing. I already told my sister we'd come to her pool party. Your mom always makes everything about her. Honestly, your family is exhausting, and your mom's house smells like old carpet, and I don't want Jalen around that energy. Jalen is my grandson. He is 3 years old. I have kept him every Friday night since he was 6 weeks old so his parents could sleep. I stood at my stove and I read that message 4 times. The ham was glazing. The kitchen smelled like brown sugar and cloves. Outside, the birds were doing what birds do in July, which is make noise like the world is a perfectly fine place. I put the phone face down on the counter. I did not call my son. I did not text back. I did not forward the message to anyone or make a comment in the group chat. I turned the burner down, wiped my hands on my apron, and I sat at my kitchen table for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because the clock above the refrigerator has a second hand, and I watched it. Then I got up and I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my cousin Teresa in Atlanta. She is 71 years old, and she is the family's other organizer, the one who remembers every birthday and every funeral, and who said what at whose wedding in 1987. I told her what happened, not the whole thing. Just enough. I told her the reunion was being moved to her daughter's place in Stone Mountain. Her daughter has a big backyard, had offered it twice before, and had always been told no because I like to host. I told Teresa to spread the word, tell everyone the address changed. Don't explain why. Teresa paused for exactly 2 seconds and then said, say less. That's the thing about women who have been around long enough. They don't need the full story. They have lived enough story to fill in the rest. The second call was to the tent rental company. I told them I needed to move the delivery address. I gave them Teresa's daughter's address in Stone Mountain. There was a rebooking fee of $60. I paid it. The third call was to my friend Henrietta from church, who had agreed to help me cook. I told her I needed her car and her help for a different reason today. I told her to meet me at my house in 1 hour. We were going to load up both our vehicles with the food I had already prepared and drive it to Stone Mountain. I told her I would explain on the way. She said, I'll bring my good coolers. That is friendship, that right there. While I waited for Henrietta, I packed up the ham, the brisket, the sides, the pies, everything I had been cooking since the day before yesterday. I wrapped things carefully. I labeled the containers. I worked in my kitchen the way I have worked in every hard situation in my life, which is quietly and completely, without breaking down, because the work needs to get done and breaking down can happen later. My son texted me at 7:45. Hey mama, we're gonna be a little late, probably 11 instead of 10. That okay? I did not respond. He texted again at 9:15. Mama, you need us to bring anything? I did not respond. Henrietta arrived at 8:30 with 3 large coolers and the good sense not to ask too many questions until we were in the car. I told her the story on the highway. She listened the whole way through without interrupting, which is another thing I love about her. When I finished, she said, and your son doesn't know yet? I said no. She said, how do you think he's going to feel when he gets to your house and finds it empty? I said, I think he's going to feel exactly how I felt at 6:14 this morning. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, that's fair. We pulled into Teresa's daughter's neighborhood a little before 10. The tent was already up. The folding tables had been relocated by a small army of cousins who had gotten the message and mobilized like only Southern families can. By the time the first guests started arriving from out of town, there was food on every table and music coming from a Bluetooth speaker someone had set up near the back fence. I stood in that backyard and I hugged people I hadn't seen since before the pandemic. I held my aunt from Detroit who was 83 and cried a little on her shoulder, which I did not plan to do but which felt right. I watched the children run through the sprinklers and I ate a plate of food and I did not check my phone for 2 hours. At 11:40, my son called. I let it ring. He called again at 11:42. I stepped away from the gathering and walked to the side of the house where it was quiet and I answered. He said, Mama, where are you? We're at your house. Nobody's here. The door is locked. What's going on? His voice sounded confused, not guilty, just confused. I said, the reunion is at Teresa's daughter's place in Stone Mountain. I sent the address to the group chat this morning. He said, what? Why? We didn't get... And then I heard silence, a long silence, and I knew in that silence that he had opened the group chat and seen his wife's message sitting there at the top from 6:14 in the morning, delivered to 41 people. He said, Mama. Just that, just my name. I said, the food is good this year. You should come if you want to come. It's a long drive from your side of town, but people came from Atlanta and Detroit, so... And then I hung up. I went back to the yard. I ate a piece of 7-layer cake. My 83-year-old aunt grabbed my hand at some point and said, this is the best reunion we've had in years. You did good, baby. And I squeezed her hand and I said thank you, and I meant it all the way down to the floor of me. My son and his wife did not come to Stone Mountain that day. I don't know if they went to her sister's pool party. I don't know if they sat in the parking lot of my empty house and had a conversation that was a long time coming. I don't know, and that afternoon I genuinely didn't spend much time wondering. What I know is that 43 people ate well, laughed loud, and stayed until the sun went down. What I know is that my cousin's little boy from Phoenix, who was 5 and had never met anyone on this side of the family, spent 3 hours following my aunt around that she was the most fascinating person he had ever seen, which she is. What I know is that the tent held up against a 40-minute drizzle around 2 o'clock and nobody left early. My son called me the next morning, Sunday, early before 8. He said his wife hadn't realized I was in the group chat. He said she felt terrible. He said those exact words, "She feels terrible, Mama." I said, "I know." He said, "She wants to apologize." I said, "That's between her and God and me, and I'll deal with mine when I'm ready." He got quiet. Then he said, "Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to move the whole reunion without saying anything?" And I thought about that question for a second. I thought about how for 6 years I had said nothing when his wife made small comments about my cooking, my neighborhood, my furniture, how I had swallowed 100 small insults the way you swallow something bitter because you don't want to make a scene at the dinner table. How I had told myself she was young, she was adjusting, she didn't mean it the way it sounded. I said, I told 41 people in the group chat at 6:15 in the morning. He didn't have an answer for that. Here is what I have learned in 63 years on this earth. You teach people how to treat you, not with speeches, not with arguments, not with long tearful phone calls at midnight where you catalog every grievance and they apologize and nothing changes. You teach them with what you do and what you don't do, with what you show up for and what you quietly, cleanly remove yourself from. I did not cancel the reunion. I moved it. I did not stop feeding my family. I just served the meal somewhere else. I did not explode. I did not post anything. I did not call my son screaming at 7 in the morning. I finished glazing the ham and I made 3 phone calls and I drove to Stone Mountain with Henrietta and I had the best afternoon I'd had in years. The ham was good. The brisket was better. The 7-layer cake was exactly right. My daughter-in-law texted me a week later. A long message, full of apologies and explanations, and the word exhausted used twice, once about her own life, and once to describe how she must have been feeling when she sent that text. I read it. I didn't respond that day. I made myself wait, not out of cruelty, but because I have learned that the things I say when I am still too close to the hurt are not always the things I actually mean, and I prefer to mean what I say. 3 days after that, I texted back. 3 sentences. I read your message. I appreciate you saying it. We'll talk soon. Not forgiveness. Not the door slamming shut either. Just the truth of where I was. My son has called me every morning this week. Not about anything specific. Just to talk. Yesterday he told me about a problem he's having at work. I gave him my opinion, which is what I always do, and he listened, which he doesn't always do. And then we sat on the phone in comfortable silence for a minute, the way we used to do when he was a teenager and would call me from his room even though I was just downstairs. I don't know what my daughter-in-law tells herself about what happened. I don't know if she understands what that message cost her, what it cost to find out on a Saturday morning that someone thinks your house smells bad and your family is exhausting and your grandchild shouldn't be near you. I don't know if she has thought about the drawer full of yellow drawings, or the Friday nights, or the $4,000, or the years I sat with her in her grief. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. Some people need time to understand the weight of a thing. What I know is that I didn't fall apart. What I know is that I stood in my kitchen at 6 in the morning with the smell of brown sugar and cloves in the air, and I read something that could have ruined an entire day, an entire year, an entire relationship, and I chose not to let it do that. I chose to protect what mattered and put the rest down. The reunion happened. The family was together. My aunt danced to one song after the drizzle stopped and the sun came back out, and she is 83 years old and her knees aren't what they were, and she danced anyway. And I watched her and I thought, this is why. This is why you do the work. This is why you buy the ham and rent the tent and drive to Stone Mountain with a car full of food and your best friend, riding shotgun. Not because anyone will always deserve it, but because the people gathered in that backyard do. I am 63 years old. I have buried a husband and a mother and 2 people I thought were friends, and one version of myself that I'm glad is gone. I know what it costs to stay silent when you should speak, and what it costs to stay when you should speak, and what it costs to speak when silence would have served you better. On this particular Saturday in July, silence was the right tool. And the ham fed 43 people with enough left over to send plates home with 3 aunts who had long drives ahead of them. That's enough. That has always been enough. I still think about that 11 minutes at my kitchen table, the clock ticking, the ham glazing, the birds outside not knowing anything had shifted. What I've come to understand is that what happened that Saturday wasn't really about a reunion. It was about what gets built up slowly over years, the small dismissals, the looks, the words that were never quite directed at you but always landed close enough to sting, and what eventually, quietly, falls due. I didn't plan to teach anyone a lesson that morning. I'm not wired that way. I'm not someone who schemes or plots or waits for the right moment to strike. What I did was simpler than that. I looked at what was in front of me, I decided what I could live with, and I acted accordingly. That's not strategy. That's just having spent 63 years learning the difference between what you can change and what you can only choose how to carry. My daughter-in-law is not a villain. I want to be clear about that. She is a woman who got comfortable enough to be careless, and there is a version of that which is almost understandable. We all get careless with the people we think will always be there. We all, at some point, take something for granted that we shouldn't. The problem isn't the carelessness itself. The problem is what you do when you're caught in it. Whether you look directly at what you did, or whether you reach for the word exhausted twice in an apology and hope that covers it. What I had to sit with after the food was packed and Henrietta and I were on the highway and the morning was fully bright was my own part in it. 6 years of swallowing things. 6 years of telling myself she was adjusting. She didn't mean it. It wasn't worth the conflict. That silence wasn't grace. It was avoidance. And avoidance has a cost that eventually comes due, sometimes on a Saturday morning at 6:14, delivered to 41 people by accident. The strongest thing I did that day wasn't making those 3 calls. It was staying clear-headed enough to know what I actually wanted. Not revenge. Not an explosion. Not to blow up my son's marriage or spend the afternoon crying in an empty house. I wanted my family together. I wanted my 83-year-old aunt to dance in a backyard. I wanted the food I had cooked for 2 days to be eaten by people who loved each other. So I moved the table, literally. I just moved it somewhere else and kept going. That takes something. It takes knowing yourself well enough to separate what you're feeling from what you actually value. It takes the discipline to act on your values instead of your hurt. And it takes the kind of quiet toughness that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just gets the coolers packed and the address changed and shows up anyway, because the people in that backyard deserve to be shown up for even when you are the one who just got knocked down. Teresa said less and she meant it. Henrietta brought her good coolers and didn't ask too many questions. That's what real steadiness looks like in other people. They don't need the whole story. They just show up with what's needed. I think about the drawer full of yellow drawings. I think about the Friday nights. I think about the $4,000 and the ham in the tent and the jazz trio in the original plan that never played a note. And then I think about my aunt dancing after the drizzle stopped, and the 5-year-old from Phoenix who followed her around all afternoon like she was a wonder of the world. Which she is. Which is the whole point.